Hi, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
Got to ask, sir, are you a
Yeah,
Rush fan yet?
working on it. Not quite there.
All right, just curious. And welcome once again to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast. Each week, we two guys get together and we talk about records because that's pretty much it. My name is Jim. That's just it. I'm a record store owner. That defines me.
That's right. And I'm Steve, and I'm a record collector, and that's my retirement.
Which is kicking into gear, I think, this week, after this week, once again, until next spring.
Yeah, it will be. We for the month we still have stuff we have to do. We have to shut down pools and that. But what I do is really slowing down. It's like these. One of the what should I do? I don't know. So
Well, you know what? That'll give you extra time to update your Discogs.
yes, yes. Oh Lord, boy, yeah.
Make sure provided it's working correctly. How's that?
Yeah, yeah. Jim's referring to. I keep buying some albums. I go, I own that already, but I swear to God, I put it in Discogs. What happened? I'm buying too many. Oh well. Oh well.
Well, you can take this extra time in the waning winter of pool cleaning in Colorado to double check your stuff.
There we go. Yeah, awesome.
Amazing how quickly this has moved. By the way,
It
it seems
has.
like you just went out there and were flooded with
Yeah.
just work in your
Yeah.
early retirement.
Yep. Yes. Ah, it's nice and quiet now.
Well, there we go. Hey, so today on the podcast, Steve had a little idea. This is an interesting one to talk about the first albums from a group that we've gotten that, maybe you're not too popular with other folks. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, it's just, they're not the normal. This is the best one. This is the critics will say that's the one you have to have. And we kind of look, go, is it really? I don't think so.
Well, we'll dive into that. This could be a very interesting. Mine, when I put it together, it was just this interesting list of very obnoxious albums.
Oh,
I, I showed them to Kim. I said, "Can you guess what the subject is?" And she's like, rolled her eyes. So who knows?
well, mine weren't obnoxious, but I've seen your
They can
your
be.
collection.
They can be. So before we get to that, though, as this is the Vinyl Community Podcast, and if you spend any time in the vinyl community, aside from people opening up sealed records, which I've seen a lot more videos on,
Yeah.
wow, holy cow. We do like to show off our recent pickups. I had let's call my week unofficial, shall we? But let's start with you, Steve. What kind of goodies did you bring in this week?
Well, in actuality, this week I had nothing. Nothing. But
No.
last week I had so much. It says, well, I went to a record store on that previous Saturday and I didn't show what I had from that record store. So
Yep.
we're going to go back a week to bring them in. But yes, nada, nunca, zero for a week.
Wow. Oh,
Oh God! But
I need to ship you some stuff.
yeah, all right. But when I'd gone out and done I met with a VC a VC member. Tice is his name, from Sound of Minder, is his channel. And so we went to a record store that neither of us had been to before. And I finally found the Wall of Voodoo. Been
Oh,
looking
cool.
for this, used to have it in the collection. Yeah, it's just such an interesting album. His vocals are something very different. But I was glad to get it has Mexican radio.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd recently got that EP from Record Store Day. I like that EP better than this. And I used to have that EP. I go, well, that's not Mexican radio. But now after listening to that differently, and this still I still like, and it's still a very good album. But that EP from Record Store Day was really good.
Those aren't tremendously expensive either, are they? The
No,
early.
no. No, they're not. I just couldn't find that. It took me
Hmm.
forever to find that album. Even Radio Wasteland never got in a copy for me. So I don't know
Sorry.
what's going on. And I brought this one back in my collection, The
Oh, there we
Vapors.
go.
Because sometimes we're just turning Japanese, and I really think so. So it again one used to have. I bought it brand new when it came out, and so there it was in that bin too. So I thought, wow, that's two of them off my list of things I want.
At one record store.
Yeah,
Holy
one
cow.
record store found this. It's a brand new Elvis by Beavis Frond. And Beavis Frond is a guy named Nick Solomon, and he loves Jimi Hendrix. He's a big psych guy. He started making music in the mid 80s in his home recording studio and still making stuff. And I didn't know he was still out putting out stuff. And I'm in the store and go, oh my God, it's Beavis Frond.
Hmm.
So grab that sucker up. Pretty good. Psych. I still, listening to it and that, but so far I've really enjoyed what I've heard. And the final two. No, there's three. No, there's four. I told you. Oh my! It was an expensive record store trip. Okay,
There we go.
I didn't buy any like crazy wall stuff, for $100 or anything. But Kageki Moyo, a group out of Japan that I absolutely love. I got their first album and their third album. So Kageki Moyo, just self-titled. And then Kageki Moyo, and this is The Tall Grass. Japanese psych at its very best. It is. They have a label. Was it Guru? No, I can't think of the name of the label they have. But they really promote other psych artists, and they actually live in Europe. But yeah, they are Japanese. I'm trying to get
Now,
there. We go. All right.
are they newer albums or just reissues of some older psych?
These two are reissues from the I would say probably I think about 2016, 2017.
So we're not talking 60s psych, 70s
No,
psych.
no, we're not talking. We're talking some of the new psych. And Japan has had so many awesome psych bands
Oh
that have
yeah.
come
Oh
up.
yeah.
And so this is one of the very best. They recently broke up and doing other projects right now. Here's one, just tried it. Rebel Shoes from the 80s. Jangle Pop. Never heard of them. But
Okay.
look,
No?
they're by a grain elevator. So I can't. There we go. They're by a grain elevator. So I thought, well, it must be pretty good. I mean, who doesn't love a grain elevator? But it's just Jangle Pop from Athens, Georgia. Came out in the mid 80s. REM was taken off. So,
Yep.
popular. Pretty good. I mean, it's middle of the road Jangle Pop. It was inexpensive. And then the very first album from Matthew Sweet.
Oh.
I've never seen this before. And I like Matthew Sweet. His third album was Girlfriend, which is one of my all-time favorite albums. Way up there on my list. I think in 1981, that was my top album, my favorite album. So this is, and I just saw it. It was inexpensive. And I go, I'll give it a try. I really didn't need it. This is one of those things where now it's going to take up some room. Where did I have to have it? No, but I was interested enough to see what does this sound like. And this is back when he was thin, I guess. So that is not the case anymore. But good stuff. Yeah, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. So
cool.
That's what I had a little over a week ago. So Jim, what did you find?
You had a heck of a week, but yeah, mine's a normal week. But I found after kind of compiling these things, I went on the unofficial route after the first one, and we got some bootlegs to show here. First up, and I think I mentioned this last week when you showed yours off, that I had to wait for the stock to get back up into the store so I could open one up and enjoy a store play copy that will probably end up in my collection. It's the Smashing Pumpkins Greatest Hits, their new one, Rotten Apples. Is what this is called. Yep, Rotten Apples Greatest Hits. And mirroring everything you said last week about this, Steve, I think it's great just to have this to throw on there, and you hear some of the Smashing Pumpkins tunes that you really only get if you've got some of the earlier albums, and it's some deeper cuts on it. It's like, oh yeah, see, that's a cool tune, man. And from their debut. So this, I think, is a great compilation. It's so affordable compared to their other stuff.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I mean, it's crazy what their the reissues even go for.
It is, but I think that was a good move on. I don't know if it was their part or the label's part to compile that and put it out, but happy they did, because that's a good one. We got a few copies in the store, so I can actually play mine very often to get used to it. Now, onto the unofficial route. I just one of those weeks. I picked up a newer pressing of Rush at Pink Pop. Let me pull that off of there. In 1979. So it's in the Netherlands at the Pink Pop Festival. They played there in 79. A lot of groups have played there throughout the years. This one's being billed as a live radio broadcast. I'm not sure. The audio quality is good on it. It's just not great compared to some of the older, in one of the bootlegs I've got here. But it's an interesting little thing. I'll add this to my my live Rush and bootleg stuff. All stuff I own in one way, shape, or form, but I did not have a Pink Pop concert. And I think that there are other versions of this out there that are more complete, have a large, because they played a big set. So this is just 6 songs, but they're Rush songs, so they're all 10 minutes. Not all, most of them. Yeah. But here's what's interesting.
Is the vinyl pink? Is the vinyl pink?
The vinyl, I'm getting to that. The vinyl is not only pink, Steve, it is the pinkest pink I have ever seen. It's the pinkiest pinks. Check this out. It doesn't do it justice, but the colored vinyl, I mean, even in person, is just so darn bright. You can't quite see it on there, but it's quite possibly the pinkest record I've ever seen or own.
Pink Pop in person is very bright. All right.
Indeed. Now, an older bootleg, I had a collection. I think I mentioned this about a month or so back, that we brought in a collection that had a lot of 70s bootlegs in them. And I'm getting through them. I got a few out on the floor here at the store. Some of them sound so horrible. It's not even funny. It's just some dude in the audience at a Cheap Trick concert holding up a tape recorder, and every once in a while you hear a woo, just hollered. But that's, the point. We had a bootleg episode. We talked about that. I think the point with a lot of the older bootlegs, especially, is not so much I'm getting this for the audiophile quality of a show, but rather the rarity of a picture in time of this band that I like. So I am getting through these bootlegs. I've got a few more to go here at the store, but there was one that I kept, and it's not a live one. This is very interesting. It's called We Found It in a Trash Can, Honest, by Boston. Now, this is the demo tapes bootlegged for the first Boston album, true bootleg form. It's there. Nothing on the label. It's got one of those printed sheets. Nothing. Yeah, well, I take it back. The label, one of the side labels says it's Dragonfly Records presents Sounds of the 60s, a musical documentary. It is actually the Boston demo tapes. Gave this a listen, and I like Boston. I'm not a huge Boston super fan, but I like the first album enough with it. Yeah. That's one of those albums that it is a greatest hits album in and of itself. Yep. And let me just read the this has got the printed sheet that goes in there. Let me read the front of this. It says, during the summer of 1975, Tom Schultz recorded the songs on this album. They were recorded at his 24-track home-built basement studio. These same tracks were later used as audition tapes for the group Boston when Schultz and his band later signed with their current label. All of the songs were re-recorded for that first album. So the differences between these demo versions and the final takes are sometimes subtle, sometimes obvious. For example, several of the songs have now been retitled with verses added and or dropped. One song has never been released at all. So the value of these recordings to the collector is obvious, and we take great pride in presenting them. So it is exactly what it says. So rock and roll band. It's a song called Life Isn't Easy, which became Something About You, More Than a Feeling, Don't Be Afraid of Love, Peace of Mind, and San Francisco Day, which would become the song Hitch a Ride. So it's a very interesting picture in the process of what became one of the greatest rock albums, I think, of all time, in Boston's debut self-titled. And these are just those early versions of this. So again, the sound quality is not fantastic, but it's still very, very, I mean, it's a very cool addition to the collection, and I'm happy to have it.
That's awesome. Wow.
I doubt I'm going to find Boston demo tape stuff for the playlist today. So now, lastly, this is so brand new. This is such a brand new unofficial, I'll use the term bootleg as well, but unofficial release that I had to put this into Discogs because it did not exist. In fact, it didn't exist on vinyl. Well, I take it back. There were vinyl pressings of this, but it has been since the 90s when this soundtrack was released. And I think that when we had our episode on soundtracks, I said, this is one of the ones, why don't they ever repress this? Well, somebody bootlegged it. And I'm talking about the Pump Up the Volume soundtrack from the Christian Slater movie from the early 90s. Great stuff on here. Concrete Blonde covering, everybody knows the, it's going to escape me now. You know who he is.
Yeah.
Leonard Cohen. Ian Neville's on here. Liquid Jesus, the Pixies, Peter Murphy, Bad Brains, kicking out the jams from MC5, Soundgarden, Sonic Youth, the Cowboy Junkies, and Chagall Guevara. So absolutely and totally bootleg unofficial, but I'm still happy to have it. I jumped on it when I saw that they were putting it. And it's so odd too, because there's no label there. This is not on any label that I could find. And for them to do this, I mean, even the inner sleeves are just kind of pictures from the front and back that mirror that. They put this sucker out on yellow vinyl. But here's what's kind of interesting for them to not go through the trouble to, come up with something cool for an inner sleeve or track listings. Inside, and you can barely see this, the inside of the LP is printed, the jacket. So it's got some imagery from the covers printed on there as well. So, hey, either way, I'm happy to have this. This is one of those soundtracks. I love the movie. I'm an old radio guy, as you know. So this was just a fun movie. I remember seeing this movie in the theater with my then new wife, Kim. And it's about a kid who sets up a pirate radio station in his basement and ends up getting busted by the FCC. And I just remember her looking at me when the picture ended. She goes, "Don't you dare. Don't even think about it." So, from working radio at the time. But so I don't know if that's a precursor, if we're going to see an official release of this. Sound quality is decent. I mean, they obviously took the CD and just and burned it, but some bootlegger in Eastern Europe somewhere with no label to speak of just said, "Hey, you know what? We should probably bootleg that."
Yeah.
And see where that happens. So that's that. I had an unofficial week, but I'll do my best. So fun stuff.
That Boston one that's very interesting. That's the
cool.
kind of fun stuff when you collect. It's this is something different. Shows a little bit more about it. Now I know we've talked a lot about like there's this Velvet Underground demos. Well, do I really have to have that? But that one was unofficial. That was neat. Yeah,
it was too. Now that Velvet Underground is one of the upcoming ones for October, isn't it? If I remember right.
Yep.
We'll have to see. So every week, by the way, dear viewers and listeners, we attempt to put together a Spotify playlist to show you, give you a chance rather to listen to some of the cuts that we're talking about on these records. I'll do my best with some of that Japanese psych that Steve put out, and I doubt I'm going to see any Boston stuff, but I might be able to come up with some of the other ones, and the Rush Pink Pop might be a little difficult to find, but if they're out there on Spotify, I'll put them in the playlist so you folks can enjoy them as well. So make sure you check that out. So before we get to subject matter at hand this week, I do want to share one thing that's making the viral rounds. I sent you a copy of this yesterday, Steve.
Yeah.
just for your approval. Now, I don't remember how many episodes back this was, but it was a little ways back. We had a discussion about live music and whether or not some acts should consider hanging it up when they reach a certain point in their lives. They've accomplished so much that maybe it's time just to sit back, rest on their laurels, and enjoy their residuals. Hopefully they saved enough for it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I see this start making the rounds. And what I'm seeing mostly of this on YouTube, are Gen Zers, one of the younger generations, discovering this baby boomer act and just ridiculing and mocking the heck out of it. And I'm talking about Frankie Valli, who is now in his 90s. Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons, very storied career. But the younger generation is having a blast just dissecting his current tour, his current performances, basically calling him an animatronic robot that like you'd see at the Hall of Presidents, or a walking corpse performing on stage. Now, that may be a little unfair to Frankie Valli, or so I thought, until I dug up a couple of the source videos.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Steve. I'm gonna throw this out here for our viewers' perusal here. This was recorded just last month, early August, in Saratoga Mountain View Winery. And I'm not going to play the audio because of all things, I do not want a copyright strike for this. But the video, I believe, will speak for itself. And if you can just picture Frankie Valli's biggest song, one of his biggest, Walk Like a Man, and he's got young background singers kind of singing and dancing along with him. Their mics are probably live as well. And here is Frankie Valli up there, not even trying to lip sync as he goes through this song. It becomes sad at a point. Maybe I'm just overreacting on this. The guy's doing what he loves, right? He's out there performing. He's earning money for himself and his family. But there's a part of me that says this just isn't right.
Yeah, it's like almost like someone said, you need to go out and do this. And I know a lot of these folks, they're used to applause, they're used to the adulation of the audience, which is a big part of it. You get a natural high from that. But yeah, there is that point in life where you just kind of got to look and maybe play it back and go, wow, I probably should be doing it.
I'll leave this to our viewers. If you want to dig this up, just do the search for Frankie Valli Saratoga or Frankie Valli lip sync, and you're going to be inundated with tons of videos of this gentleman just on stage. But again, the amount of, the lack of effort, rather, I think that's going into this lip syncing is just, it's incredible to see. Now, and I think I mentioned to you too, maybe the audience doesn't care. They're getting to see Frankie Valli in person. Does it matter if it's audio from probably 10 to 20 years ago? Of him? I'm guessing that the background singers are actually singing, and maybe the band is actually playing, but I don't know. Does it matter?
He kind of looks like part of the cast from The Walking Dead.
Yeah, there you go. Now,
it's scary.
How current is the tour, you may ask, Steve? It's ongoing. I called this up. It's a Ticketmaster site for Frankie Valli coming up in Detroit on October 13th. You can get VIP packages upwards of $200, but there are tickets available in the orchestra pit for $400 to see this. Lips $195, $150. Then you get a little more realistic on the floor in the $60 to $70 range. Up in the balconies, you're looking at $40 up and through there. But I can't fathom, you've got to be a huge fan, I would imagine, to say, I'm just going to go watch this gentleman in his 90s who once had a fantastic career in the 70s and in the 60s, just kind of stand there.
Yeah, I just, and is that how you want to remember him? That kind of comes to my whole thing is that really, to see something like that, and then that's kind of ingrained in your mind. It's like,
that ends up being the last memories of somebody who had a storied career. So, but exactly. I was a little torn at first, like, oh, you know what? Just the dude's having fun. He's earning money. Just stop making fun of him, kids. Get off my porch, get off my lawn. And then I saw a few of them. I'm like, oh. Now, Kiss sold their likeness, so we won't have to go through Gene Simmons doing that when he's in his 90s.
Yeah,
it'll just be it'll be the hologram.
Yeah, there'll still be ABBA touring there, and we'll have them.
They could have maybe they could have gone that route with Frankie too, and just put the hologram up instead of the stick. Okay, I'm sorry. Enough of me griping about that. Each to their own. If you enjoy it, you want to see Frankie Valli, go for it. Have fun.
You bet.
Go to Detroit, spend $200 on just the base tickets to see a lip sync.
And let us know what you thought.
Let us know what you thought as well. It's not for everybody. And you know what else isn't for everybody, Steve? Some of the music I listen
albums,
to.
yeah.
And some of your albums and some of my albums. It's just not the types of the things that most folks are into. And that's okay. It's the same thing we just said with Frankie Valli. If that's one you want to listen to, you want to go see, go for it. If I want to listen to Rush, Permanent Waves, when my friend Steve's just like, it's all right.
Yeah.
So be it. So
yes.
Tell me a little bit about this idea of delving into this, just stuff that you dig and may not be on everybody's high list.
Yeah, I've been watching some different video. Yeah, well, actually, I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and people are showing albums, and they're going, "Yeah, we got this one, and it's an okay one from that group." I go, and I always come back. That's my favorite album from them. I love that album, and almost every time the reason why I like that album is because it's the first one I bought from the group.
Yep.
And it may be a group that I didn't know. I've never had any of their music, and I get this, I put it on, and to me, that's what that group sounds like. I really love that album. Then you get some of their other stuff that are, the critics' darlings where everyone loves. You go, but that's not like that first one that I bought when that I really, really love. And so, yeah, as I've been watching this, kind of go, but I love that album. What's wrong with that one?
And it's not necessarily the first album of a group. It's just the one that you land in. And groups that have been around for long storied careers experiment with different types of music on different albums. So it's not something that they're stuck in unless you're AC/DC, but you may have albums that appeal to different people.
Yeah, and because groups want to change and morph, and that's where a lot of this is. There's a change happening within that group, and so those first albums that many people feel are iconic, suddenly they change. Go, well, they kind of change stuff up. That's not like those albums, and we have those albums too. We buy from a group. We get those first few albums, and then Greta Van Fleet bought that first Greta Van Fleet. Wow, this is great. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, well, I don't know. It's just not the same anymore. While other people are clamoring for it and they love it. Yeah.
It comes down again to, I mean, that's what makes collecting so unique to the individual. It is what you like. It is your tastes. It is how you interpret and what the music of that particular group or that particular record means to you.
Exactly. Yeah, very much so. So
well, I've already shown
everyone has these. Yeah.
I've already shown my first. Let me just kick this out. And I jokingly refer to this with Steve, and that's Rush's Permanent Waves from 1980. Oh, man, I'm just going to kick myself, and all the Rush fans are going to kick me for not remembering offhand. 80-81 on this. And I'm not saying that this is not a popular album with lots of folks. 80. I'm sorry. See, there's me. I'm having still some brain farts on this. But Rush is one of those groups for me, Steve, that has changed enough over time. There's certain segments that I don't like. This was my first Rush album. We've talked about that inherently. Yeah. And it's different from their earlier just heavy, hard rock stuff, which then morphed into their more spacey, prog rock stuff. This one took a lot more radio friendly, but it's where I stepped in. And to some Rush fans, this one is great. To some others, it's not, because it's not the heavy stuff. But this one, I think, has got a much brighter sound than some of their earlier stuff. It's not weighted by super heavy guitars. And like their stuff that came afterwards, it's not really kind of overused on the synthesizer side of things. So this one for me, I think, does well. And I know that it's not for everyone, I guess, is the best way to put it. And Rush fans in particular can be very particular when it comes to the era that they like the most.
Sure. That one, I did, again, you gave me a copy of that one, and I enjoyed it. It had a couple of hits on there that I really, really liked. I know you like side 2 better than side 1, and I was side 1 because I'm a greatest hits kind of guy. But yeah. Yeah, I get
Well,
that
I
one.
like, just to clarify, I like the whole thing because I think that's the perfect album, Steve.
Ah, the perfect album. Okay, all right. That's Boston. All right, my first one. A lot of compliments of Columbia Record Club and a young person not turning in his card, so he gets the album of the month. And there's many albums that I have that I just, oh yeah, I have to turn that in. Oh well, procrastination, shall we say? But I got Marvin Gaye's "I Want You." And yeah, I knew Marvin Gaye heard it through the grapevine on AM radio. That's pretty much all I knew of Marvin Gaye. Not much else. I think this one came out in 75, 76. This came out. So I was fairly new to Columbia Record Club. And, and I looked at, the artwork was just fantastic. I go, wow, look at that. That is so cool. And I put this thing on, and it is so soulful. So, I mean, slow dance were, I mean, there's a lot of bedroom music in here, shall we say, quite a bit, but it's just his voice is perfect on here. The horns were incredible, beautiful stuff going on, and there's some faster pace, but most of it's just kind of a slower Marvin Gaye that just sultry, sweaty kind of stuff, and it was different for me. I know albums like this, and it's just like, man, this is just fantastic. And to me today, it's still my very favorite Marvin Gaye album. He has those classics that are out there that are wonderful albums. But this is the one, if I had one Marvin Gaye, that I will pull and listen to again and again because it made such a great impression on me when it came out. So yeah, I really love this one.
And I think that the testament to that, though, is the attention that what's going on receive critically and audience reception wise. That one is just a culturally important album. So I think that overshadows a lot of his other stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I'm going to take a complete 180. We're thinking soulful and deep and meaningful Marvin Gaye. Let's kick into They Might Be Giants.
I can't
how,
figure that's coming.
how polar opposite can we get on this one? This is
Yeah.
They Might Be Giants, their first self-titled LP from Bar None Records going back to 1986. And this was my first foray into They Might Be Giants. I was working radio at the time, and so that's what was out there. And it had a big hit on here in the song Don't Let's Start. But I think that They Might Be Giants through their long career have picked up on some other things, whether it be Birdhouse in Your Soul, the kids stuff they did, or even Istanbul, Not Constantinople, the cover song through there, that this one tends to be shuffled back as their humble beginnings, regardless of how big that song Don't Let's Start was on. But as a whole, this album is as quirky as you'd expect from They Might Be Giants, and therefore is not on the palette for most listeners. I think, is that a good way to put it?
Yeah.
Most of the songs are short, 1 or 2 minutes, if even that, and some of them are just bizarro land. But I've always thought this has been a fun record. I think it does hold true to be my favorite They Might Be Giants record still to this day. Just on the weight of that one song, but all of the other weirdness that comes into play with this too, I think is really carried forward. Now, we joke about me liking and trying to be a They Might Be Giants completist as well. They've gotten, and to me, like Rush, they've gotten a certain sort of cult following that has carried them forward for 30 years. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if you dig them, you dig them. If you don't, you don't. And I saw these guys live several years back in Detroit as well, and they put on a fantastic show with a full band, by the way.
Okay.
So fun
Very
stuff
nice.
from TMBG.
All right. My next pick, it's again from high school, and I was at the local 5 and dime store, the Ben Franklin back then, that we had, and they had like a couple bins of records. There wasn't a lot, but there was a few of them, and I'm not sure what to buy. So a friend of mine who bought music, his name was Randy Grubbs, whose dad owned Grubbs Food Store. Isn't that a great name for a food store? Grubbs Food. You want some grub? Come to Grubbs Food. But he said, have you heard this group? And he pulled up this. They're called, it's Led Zeppelin. I go, who? Led Zeppelin. I go, really? He goes, yeah, you should get this album. It's really good. I go, is it? Yeah, all right. Well, okay, I'll buy it. And so I did. And it's my first time listening to Led Zeppelin. And Achilles' Last Stand is the very first song on there. And I was just blown away by that. Now, here it's, they're going, I mean, that's a long song. It's like kind of prog, huh? I mean, it goes on forever, but it was so good. I had been reading the Iliad, so, I'll say, well, that's neat. But the whole album, I just really got into, and this little monolith, it's like, what is it? Wow, look at that. I mean, this is an album cover I looked at again and again and again, and I mean, Lord, look at that. What she's doing, that monolith in that kid's brain. I mean, who knows what's happening there? The stories that come from this album. But this is not on most people's list of the greatest Led Zeppelin. There's going to be four, which four is fantastic. Four is like a perfect album, Led Zeppelin 4. And I won't argue with that. But this is the one that makes the input that I love putting on because of the memories and my first foray into Led Zeppelin and just eating it up, just, playing it again and again. And so it became like my favorite Led Zeppelin.
And it was a later Zeppelin too. And I think that speaks a little bit to how we're introduced to a group, how and when in that group's existence we're introduced.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I think the first impression can be one of the strongest, and as the case with my Rush and They May Be Giants, now you with Zeppelin. I think that's a good point to make. Is maybe that is part of the reason these remain enduring favorites to ours, whereas other people were introduced at other aspects or other points in time.
It growing up, rural Nebraska, we didn't have FM radio. Led Zeppelin was not played on AM radio. So it was just a group I was unfamiliar with because my friends weren't into music. Randy Grubbs was, but I didn't like go to his house and we didn't spin records. We were just, friends, from school and that. So yeah, so and then I learned, hey, well, Led Zeppelin, my next one was Led Zeppelin 4, because it's, well, you got to get this. It took me a long time to listen to Led Zeppelin 1 and 2 because I just thought they were just a little, they're kind of noisy, aren't they?
So my next one coming in was one of those albums when I started collecting in earnest, and we're talking in the late 80s, early 90s. We've talked before. I've been collecting since I was a kid, but never really thought of it as collecting. I was just getting music. But at a certain point where I made that turn and say, okay, I'm a record collector now, so I better get serious about it. I had a friend who I'd gotten a lot of records from, introduced me to the mothers of invention, Zappa and Freak Out. And so, this is one of those ones you got to have a copy of this in your collection. And there were a couple of songs on here that really, really dug into my brain. And I thought these are great. I loved them. And then the rest of the album was like, what the hell am I listening to? I can listen to one side, but I can't listen to much of the other side. I think this is actually not my original copy. I've since upgraded. My first one was a little beat up. But this has always kind of intrigued me because it's like, oh, you got to have some Zappa in your collection. Yeah. And to this day, and I think you share this feeling, Zappa can be hot and cold for me. I either really, really, really like it or I really, really, really don't like it. But my first foray into his music was a shared experiences on both sides of that coin. Mm-hmm. I really, really, really like this song. And then I don't really, really like this other song coming through. I had to stop and think. Wowie Zowie, side 2. Wow, with Wowie Zowie, You Didn't Try to Call Me, Any Way the Wind Blows. I think they're great songs, but I don't believe that they were Zappa trying to be a serious songwriter. He was kind of mimicking the sound of the day. And then all of a sudden we get Hungry Freaks Daddy and Who Are the Brain Police that had me going. I mean, I just didn't get it yet. Yeah. Maybe I don't to this day, but this is also, I think, one of the albums that people will say that this is a great Zappa album to have. And I'll agree until you flip it over. It's not. Sorry, Zappa fans.
Yeah, that won't make my sad. I used to have that, but I had an original. I wasn't in greatest shape, but I've never wanted to replace it.
For that one side, I'll stick with it for those songs.
Yeah. Oh, let's go back to Columbia Record Club again. another didn't return the card, and I got
Slacker.
it. Jethro Tull, Minstrel in the Gallery. No idea who the heck Jethro Tull was. Not a clue, but look at that artwork. And I go, oh, isn't that kind of cool looking, you know? And then, I had this. These guys, they're up in the gallery there, like minstrels, and it flips like that. In my first listen, the first song was kind of, that's really, really different because he's kind of talking, my lords and my ladies. And then began playing. Go, well, man, this is pretty good. And there's a lot of really soft. He's entering his Elizabethan stage, is what they call it. He's kind of getting rid of some of that harder rock sound and coming in. Though there is some great hard rock songs on here. Like Cold Wind to Valhalla. That thing just rocks. Baker Street Muse really goes. But there is definitely a lot of softer stuff. And I just fell in love with this. It is by far my favorite Tull album. Again, the one that I will play again and again. I love every single song on this, but I studied it. Again, it's before you start getting a whole bunch of stuff that you can't spend that quality time playing it over and over and over. This got a lot of quality time, and yeah, just I knew every lyric on this. So yes, favorite Tull. Thank you, Columbia House, once again helping me find a new group. And then I found out he had this song called Aqualung later on when I finally heard FM radio. Well, how about that?
And got into that. Tull is one of those groups too, and I get that from some customers here in the store that some people have a true animosity. They just dislike Tull for some reason. But again, another one of those that have so many different albums. They're all tied together with a certain sound, certain unmistakable Jethro Tull sound. But even then, you can pick up on the differences between the records and their age, like when they get into some of their 80s stuff as well.
Yeah, really.
All right. This is not going to be a surprise to you, and I don't know how you're going to feel about this one, Steve, but when you saw it there, when I picked up this album originally in 1984, I believe, 83 or 84, my friends were like, what? They didn't quite get it. What are you listening to? And I picked it up solely because of the cover and the Cramps' Bad Music for Bad People. It's a compilation album, but still a great foray. I got this, as I said, because the cover was cool. And once I started listening to it, I started getting into the music. But even then, I had some friends that were listening to the likes of Deep Purple and Van Halen. And it's like, well, let's throw this on. No. It's an acquired taste. This is, with the exception of a live bootleg, the only Cramps album I've ever had. I've never really gone further into it. Maybe it's because it's a compilation. Maybe it's because I feel that this was enough. But that's it. And, I've stuck with this particular record since 83 or 84, I think. Maybe 85. I'm trying to remember when. It had to have been 84, I think, when I pulled this one in.
To me, that would be, it's like a go-to album. I love, Songs the Lord Taught Us, made my top 10 list albums of all time from the Cramps. But that one's right up there too. Excellent.
But it's not for everyone, and I found that out in my circle of friends in the 80s. It's not for everyone.
Well, it's one of my friends brought that over and dropped Songs the Lord Taught Us, and he said, "Here, you got to listen to this," and it's just like, wow, that is awesome TV set. Wow. Okay, my next, this one up, Roxy Music, Avalon. This was my very first Roxy Music album I ever had. Didn't know much about Roxy Music whatsoever, but I'd heard the song Avalon. I go, isn't that a beautiful song? That is such a cool song. And so I went and bought this. And again, I really, really enjoyed the music that I was hearing on here. It's kind of a softer, quieter thing. Go, wow, Roxy Music's really good. And so eventually I found used albums of their earlier albums. And they were just head scratchers for me. Go, well, that's not Avalon. What is this? What's going on here? What's with all that noise and squawking and that sax player? Where's Avalon? it's they all became huge disappointments to me because this was Roxy music. It was my introduction, and it really grasped me. It was them entering, was it, the romantic stage, during the 80s, that was going on, Spandau Ballet and all that, that's dressed in suit and ties. So Brian Ferry always dressed very nice, but yeah, as part of that romanticism movement. And I just, yeah, India's on here, which is just an incredibly good song. It's, yeah, my favorite Roxy music, and not many people are picking that one.
There you go. I'm going to do a two for next because this
All
kind of
right.
falls in this falls in line with these are the only albums I have from these groups because I don't really need anything else. But it's at the same time, I dig them, but some people just my friends are just like, family even. It's like, what? It's very tough to see. So let me blow it up here a little bit. This is King Missile.
Oh boy.
We are familiar with King Missile, right, Steve? We
Yeah.
tried to do that. The name of the album is They, but it's got Dogfly Religion on there as well. But the album is They. This is from, let me call up my thing here, 1988. And I think I've had this album since 1988. King Missile is just a group that's really kind of, Discogs calls it alternative music, but I wouldn't go that far. It's like beat poetry, bad beat poetry set to just sparse guitar and a little bass here and there, and it's just it's not stuff that is supposed to make sense,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't. These
Yeah.
guys known for they tried that Record Store Day release. I don't think that ever came to fruition. Happy Hour, the one with the detachable penis, they're larger,
Yeah.
more well-known song, but this one I couldn't really tell you if they had any commercial success, but I've had it since my radio days when you couldn't really play much of it on the air.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept a copy for myself and I'll dive to it once in a while. But yeah, it's one of those things not a lot of folks will think of. And yeah, I think part of it is maybe people just don't know beyond that one song what else those guys have done. Same thing here with A Pop Will Eat Itself. This is the Day, this is the hour, this is this. This is like industrial alternative, almost that heavier dance sound from the late 80s with
Huh.
that mixture of industrial music as well. I've always dug these guys, but they're very difficult to listen to for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
They incorporate a lot of stuff from the movie The Warriors, and this as well. You hear sound bites and
Okay.
references to especially in the song "Can You Dig It" in through there. So I think that's what's been my allure to that, is because they've got some pop culture references that they fit into this as well. But again, just with each of this King Missile and the Pop Will Eat Itself, I don't have any other albums of theirs. And King Missile has a few other ones, but I've never really sought to seek to add them in.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you ever listened to these guys?
I have not listened to those guys.
You will have to listen for the Spotify playlist on there. I think you're going to dig them. I had a copy of this. I had an original copy of this, and I got rid of it at some point in time. And then I saw that there was like a music on vinyl. I think it was a higher end reissue fairly recently. And I was like, well, I'd rather have an original. So I went out and I found an original of this on Discogs just to add that back into my collection. But you might get a kick out of this stuff, I think.
All right. Yeah.
The other person that likes them.
Okay. The other one. Hey, there's two now. All right.
There's two.
Yep. Well, my final one I pulled was Rolling Stones Some Girls. And
okay, yep.
I knew who they were, so I bought this when it came out. I knew the Rolling Stones. I remember on AM radio they played Angie, that song, and I remember exactly where I was in a car. It was nighttime in the back seat, trying to fall asleep as parents were taking us home from someplace, and I heard Angie come on, and it's like, that is so neat. And I also knew Satisfaction and probably a few of their other stuff, but this was the first Rolling Stones album I went out and I purchased myself. And and again, I was in college at the time, so I had enough money to get like 3 or 4 record albums at once. But this was so much fun. It just, disco was taken off. And of course, there were, some of that stuff like Shattered you could find out on the dance floor that was happening, respectable. But Miss You, When the Whip Comes Down, Imagination. I mean, every song on this I enjoyed and just wanted to play again and again. And it's brought me more satisfaction because sometimes you can't get no when it comes to that. But I bought pretty much all their other albums, and this is still my favorite. Every song I really love on this. The other ones, there's a lot of great songs, but I don't love all of them. This one just makes me happy. And yeah, to this day, by far my favorite Rolling Stones. And I'm not sure if anybody else is going to go for that, but it's what makes that impression on you. And wow, this hit me.
Glad to see that you've got the die cut faces version of that also.
Yes.
That's like a good collector.
Mm-hmm.
I'll wrap up with one more too. And this is from a group that I enjoy. And I think it's one of those groups that as they went further into their career, they got a little more top 40-ish and annoying. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah.
Moody Blues and In Search of the Lost Chord. Now, folks are really going to be, I think, gravitating toward the first couple of Moody Blues albums, Nights in White Satin, where they're really, really known for. But this was my first foray into the Moody Blues. And it's got Ride My Seesaw on there, which for some reason is always just kind of stuck with me as a great song.
Uh-huh.
I've got a YouTube channel that pops up once in a while with a quasi live version of this done originally, one of their early music videos. I'll watch that from time to time. And it's just always kind of one of those ones that makes me, I like this song. Overall, I think that this is probably their best album. I will play this one when I have the time to do so in the store, and I've got a copy to sell. And much like Jethro Tull, I think there's so much other stuff of theirs out there that some of their earlier stuff, when it's not Nights in White Satin, will get shuffled off to the side. Yeah. And I think that this is probably one of the better ones of that era. So yeah, I enjoy it.
I never got into the Moody Blues. I do have a few of their albums. I think they're sent to me, and I don't mind putting them on, but I sure don't grab them.
Yeah.
It's kind of a rarity on there. And yes, Nights in White Satin. It's that damn poetry at the end. Just stop it.
Yeah, and Lost Chord has a little bit of that also, which as they kick in to Ride My Seesaw, you're scratching your heads like, what am I listening to? But then the music kicks in. This one has the orchestral feel that Nights in White Satin has, but not to the extent, I believe. That's just my opinion on that. So,
yeah, and musical lyrics are poetry, right? They are poetry. I can handle that. Otherwise, when it comes to poetry, if it's not a limerick, I really struggle with
it. Here's some more poetry for you to experiment with, Steve. If I can find some King Missile, I'll put a couple on there. That's, like I said, beatnik poetry set to weirdness and just offensive for the sake of being so.
Yep. Only you, Jim.
All right.
Yep.
Well, that's what makes this fun, right?
Yep, it is.
All right, folks. So we're curious. Is there an album from a group that means a lot to you that other folks are like, Let us know. You got 3 as out of me. Is that okay? It's a good album, but it's not their best. You should listen to this one instead. Yeah. And you're like, no, this is what got me into them, and this is where I like. And I think that, as I said earlier, I think that first impression counts for a lot with some of these. It may not be their most
drug.
Yeah, your entry point. Yeah, it may not be the most critically acclaimed. It may not be the most commercially successful, but dang it, this is how I found them, and I think that's why I like this one better.
Yeah. Yeah, it truly makes a difference, especially as we're younger. When we give that album all this attention, and we just again and again. As we get older, we don't always do that with albums, and I think notice that most of our albums, though you had some newer ones on there than I did, but yeah, it is a difference.
One final point to make, and you brought this up earlier with talking about Greta Van Fleet with these newer bands. Once they get 2 or 3 albums deep, they made such a huge impression that I think becomes more difficult to follow up with something that's going to be as memorable, as enticing.
Yeah.
Case in point, let me throw this out because I know that this is a band that both of us were really into. How much do you think you're going to like the second Wet Leg album whenever it shows up?
Yeah, true.
That
I've thought
hits
about
so
that
big.
too. Is it
Yeah.
going to be, can it be nearly as catchy as that? Or are they going to go, well, we need to veer into a new direction? Oh, really? Oh,
Which takes them away from the thing that made us attracted to that album in the first place.
yeah. Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. I don't know. I'm not speculating. I've never seen news to the effect that Wet Leg's coming out with something, but you would think that given their success, they would eventually have to do something.
Mhm. Yeah. It would probably be next year, every 2 years, right? This is their
Yeah.
off year. So next year they're going to come up with something. Yeah, I guess we should have listened to all the Taylor Swift and came up with our favorite one of hers.
You know what, Steve? Well, I think we're having some technical difficulties here. I'm joking. I know folks love Taylor Swift, and I'll try. I promise. I'll try eventually. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Best we can do. All right, Steve. Well, I think that will do it for this week's episode of Two Guys Talking About Records. As always, we've got our work cut out for us, finding a playlist for some of these goodies. But we'd like to share that music with you without getting copyright finger wags from the various agencies. How's that sound?
Yep, exactly.
So you folks feel free to contact us, connect with us on the Facebook page, Two Guys Talking About Records. You can comment on the Spotify episodes. I don't see many comments coming on the Spotify episodes, but we do see a lot of the comments coming through on YouTube, which is kind of cool to see as well. So however you want to, let us know what you're thinking. And 76 episodes in, Steve. I think we're creeping up on that 100 mark. We should probably think of something special to do for that 100.
Well, thank God that gives us, what was it, 24 more weeks to go.
24. I think we can manage something by then. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, you folks have a great week. Until next time, my name is Jim, and I own a record store, which I need to get around to opening up sometime today.
And I'm Steve, a record collector, and I got to go to work too, Jim. So.
Enjoy your end of the season, sir, and I'll talk to you again next week. Thanks.
You bet. Yep. Bye.